the Everything But Politics podcast.
Welcome back to Everything But Politics. My name is Merrick Leeser. I'm alongside my brothers Ethan and Evan Leeser, and joining us today is the great Mr. Kenny Werner. Kenny, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure. Thanks for taking the time. Kenny, as someone who was considered a prodigy at a young age, and as someone who spends a lot of time with people who are considered prodigies, how do you define prodigy?
Well, I mean, a prodigy has a very clear meaning. It's someone that's showing impressive ability at a young age. You know, in other words, if someone's 34 and they're amazing, the word prodigy wouldn't come to mind. Mm-hmm. If they were 9 and they were amazing, then that's the natural word for it.
What are some common traits of prodigies, right? So they're obviously amazing from a young age, but as they evolve in age, do they have, in cases, worse work ethic than those who don't, given it came to them so easily?
That's a very good question, and I can't answer for other prodigies, but I was a bit of a prodigy myself, and it actually made me very low tolerance for working on music because so much was given and it came so easily that when it was time to work, I felt quite at a loss. In fact, very upset because up until college, I didn't think you had to work at it. You just sit down and play, and you will yourself to play whatever you think you need to play that day.
So, Kenny, for some of our listeners who don't know you, what age did you begin playing piano, and when did you really find an act and start enjoying it?
I started playing at 7, but I was always an entertainer. Even at 3 and 4, I would do imitations of people on television and dance and all that kind of stuff. I started to play at 7, and at 9, I guess I was showing traits. I was already doing some, benefit concerts, and the principal of my school took me to his Kiwanis club, and I played for them, and I got those kind of things started happening around 9, and they were just strictly like that until about 13.
Wow.
And 13 was a turning point because I was bar mitzvahed, and my father had actually hired a pretty hip band.
Nice.
They were called the Four Guys, right? So, of course, I sat in. And after I sat in, they hired me. So I went from my bar mitzvah to working for a bar mitzvah band.
Wow. So this is age 13. Was this the early sign of prodigy, or was it even sooner?
I think the prodigy thing was pretty obvious. Well, at 11, I had done a recording, a single record. They used to have singles,
Yes.
And somebody paid for it. They thought, I could be a big star. And from that, I did some television at 11. And I had a really big opportunity for a show that was opposite the Tonight Show. It was called Les Crane's Nightlife. And I had 7 minutes on there with the Elliott Lawrence Orchestra. And I was interviewed, and I even got laughs. And after that, Sheila McRae came on, and she said, "Wasn't that boy wonderful?" And we were thinking, that's it. It's happened. This is it, And what happened was they cut me out of that segment because William F. Buckley went on too long. Talk about everything but politics.
Yeah.
Because William F. Buckley, that's when I became a lifelong Democrat. William F. Buckley went longer, so they had to cut me out. But they told us to keep watching. We kind of kept watching, but it never really got on. But I was on some other shows. And I used to because my father used to love the kind of piano playing that he called honky-tonk. And I guess in jazz, you would call it stride piano. And he loved that stuff. And we didn't have many jazz records at home, but he had Fats Waller. And Fats Waller played that way too. So as a result, that's the way I learned to play. Unusual for a kid to naturally play like dunk, dunk, dunk,
Uh-huh.
And I had to learn how to not do that when I started to play with bass players in junior high school.
Now, Kenny, when you played in the bar mitzvah band, what kind of music were you guys playing back then?
Well, that's what was good about it. You played a little bit of everything. You played standards. They have these classic intros and outros. and I learned them all. Just like an old trooper now. I could, play the intros that were typical and the outro, da 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 da, or whatever. And so I did learn all the regular, conventional kind of parlor music, a little jazzy. And then we had to do covers of pop things, nothing like today, where you actually have to be that band. And, it was like a jazz band doing an Elton John song.
So,
Not to
Kenny,
say that it wasn't cool, it was good, but it wasn't anything like the production,
as someone who's been doing music and piano specifically their whole life, do you find yourself ever shifting between genres beyond jazz, or do you stick mainly to jazz? I know you said you played a lot of stuff in the bar mitzvah days, but growing up, did you change and blend genres?
No, I came to jazz later. What happened was I probably was like an Elton John. I was writing songs with lyrics and singing them. And when I did, this is like in my teens and even early 20s, when I go to a gig, I would sometimes on a bar mitzvah I'd do one or two tunes, but if I was playing in a cafe or a club or whatever, I would always sing some. And I think I was going in the direction of broadly saying a Billy Joel or an Elton John. But when I went to Berkeley, all my friends were jazz musicians. They became my friends. And when I left Berkeley, they were my friends. And when I got called for a gig, it was a jazz gig. So unlike many people, I never exactly said, yes, I've grown up wanting to be a jazz musician.
How would you describe jazz music?
How would you describe jazz? Well, there's a couple of qualities about it. Doesn't really describe it. It is, without a doubt, the most valuable export that we've ever given, culturally. You think about that. What have we sent out? McDonald's and Madonna. McDonald's and Madonna. So after that, on the other hand, jazz was really a uniquely American thing, and we exported that. So for one thing, it's one of the few things America can actually feel had great value and was American. The deeper thing, not the social thing, is jazz is the ability to go wherever you want to go as long as you're okay with it.
Mm.
And there's no other music that really lets you do that. I mean, you could be playing, the Grateful Dead music and on acid, and you might feel like you could go anywhere you want to go. But the music we heard would be remarkably similar to what you were playing. The change is more on how you were feeling because you were on acid. In jazz, and I mean, there's different kind of jazz players. There's certain jazz players, which I've come to really appreciate, that have the cultural, sociocultural aspect of it. That this is jazz, this isn't jazz. Like Wynton Marsalis, I think, brought that sense of identity. Because jazz, I don't really think it was overtly a racial thing. It's just that since jazz was about improvisation, it was like a PDF. You could put anything on it, and you could change things, and you could blend it with anything, because a jazz musician is a bit of a theory person. In other words, they have to have a comfort zone with rhythm, harmony, and melody. So as such, they may, and not everybody, but they may be able to assess the rhythm, harmony, and melody of, say, Brazilian music or Indian music. Or that's not to say they can play it all, and it's not to say that it would be the most authentic, but jazz musicians are about the only ones you could say that can do all this crossover because of their study of rhythm, harmony, and melody. It doesn't matter what the music is. It contains these three things: rhythm, harmony, and melody. Even feeling or emotions are optional.
When you go to that place you describe within jazz music and improvisation, how would you describe that? Would it be a spiritual place, something divine, something? Is there a description?
Well, as best as one can describe their state of mind, when I had such a talent, I'm sorry to say, such a talent that it was so familiar to me. This is why I kind of believe in reincarnation, because you see some people 3 years old and like, how are they doing that? You know, I had some people, kids, but then they could play free with me. And I said, where'd you learn to do that? That must have been another lifetime. Actually, the best, if you were looking for it, nobody's really got the absolute confirmed truth. But the best explanation you could have for children of all ages that are so already, into, so far along the music, the best description would be they must have been musicians other times.
Right? It's almost like they're remembering.
They're coming back. They want to keep going, So yeah, there's a lot of memory there from another lifetime. You could believe in that or not, but you can't get a better explanation for why that would. Why is this kid born with that? Neither parents or even have the music gene.
Were your parents musicians?
My father was very talented, but he had to work, through the, support a family, and he always had to work. There's no question that he was extremely talented. If I was practicing a Mozart concerto, he'd be around the house whistling it. It was always the right key.
Wow.
So like me, he had perfect pitch. Yeah, and he played the alto. He wrote a few funny songs. Very musical guy. But
fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, reincarnation may not be true, but it sure does explain.
It's a good answer for that.
It's logical. If they were before.
I'm quite interested. You talk about reincarnation. In past interviews, you've also discussed Eastern ideologies. When did you start to embrace the Eastern traditions and ideologies?
Well, I kind of blanch it once you call it Eastern tradition, because it implies some sort of erudition that I don't have, or some really targeted work that I did to. It was more like part of the gift. I had a gift that I didn't seem to hold music in as high esteem as everybody else, and I was embarrassed about that. And only later on did I realize that when people were ultra attached to what they were doing, they really couldn't play.
When I say Eastern ideologies, does that come off as like too generalized?
No, it's just, let me put it this way. I've had teachers that are called gurus. I've studied things that are labeled Kashmir Shaivism. I've read books that are Buddhist or Zen. But it was more like they all confirmed something that I knew without the knowledge. You know what I mean? I said, "Oh yeah, I know what that is." It was more like that. It was kind of a natural state for me. And actually, as I started to teach, eventually I led to writing a book. And I said, I better go back and check out some of this stuff I'm just saying off from the top of my head. So, but that said, as a human, not a pianist, I need a lot more help. And I was looking for that kind of teacher. And I've had a few different teachers that it wasn't about playing the piano. It was about appreciating the moment. It was about feeling, learning, substituting, disappointment for gratitude, or just, respecting the breath and following its own. I started to notice I could go into what I called in the book. Well, for example, in the book, I called it the space. Everybody knows what the space is. There's a million different terms for it. The Holy Spirit, Hashem, Buddhist, there's a million terms. For me, this was a very Long Island answer. Well, it's a space. When you have a room that's filled with a lot of stuff, and all that stuff is thoughts. And if you just move into this other room, and nothing's in that room, you could call it a space. And somehow music would trigger me going into that space, where it wasn't about what I was trying to do. It was about just pay attention, because your hands are going to lead you somewhere, and they're going to be much more authentic than you will be. I like to say my hands play better than I do. But
I will.
my brain is smarter than I am. So
Beautiful
my
answer.
brain is smarter than I am, but my hands play better than I do. So the question might be, who am I? And that's the spiritual path. Who am I?
So,
What
Kenny,
am I
when
made of? How much am I identifying with my ego, which is the bulk of living on earth? And how much do I have visitations of the spirit side of me? And in fact, what I've thought about in recent years, is it really out there? Or I just joined something out there? Or is it that we don't still conceive of how incredibly cosmic this mind we have is? We may have created, I don't know, who knows if God is real or a neural pathway. Because if you have that neural pathway and you're praying to God, you're talking to God. In other words, I've come to think no matter what anybody thinks this is all about, they're right.
Yes. Apollo Celine's got your summer playlist covered. Check out their new bangers, Out Till Morning and Search for the Light, available on all streaming platforms. Released June 20th, 2025, these tracks are pure energy, perfect for late night drives or beachside vibes. Don't miss the songs defining summer 2025. Right.
Because it's really not what's true, because I haven't seen enough evidence that convinced me that you could say it's true. But I have had plenty of evidence of miracles when you believe something. So it's not what's true, it's what you believe.
And Kenny, I could hear the conviction in your voice. Is this something you think about quite a bit?
Yeah, but I mean, not because I'm such a heavenly guy. I struggle like a lot of people struggle on Earth with the problems Earth seems to be presenting. And I'm not talking about what everyone else is talking about. I'm talking about within my own ecosystem and ecosystem, And I never overtly wanted to be spiritual, but when I find what I'm looking for, it inevitably involves some principles of spiritual. I mean, it could sound like something that came from an Indian point of view, or can definitely sound like something that's Zen. And the thing is, the teacher for me was music. Everything I learned, I just described what it was like to do music, and people started to associate with me with a spiritual label of some kind. Because, I don't know if you also know my latest book, but it's called Becoming the Instrument.
Yes.
Are you aware of it? Well,
Yes.
The subtitle is Lessons in Mastery from Music to Life. Now, I make no apology for saying the lessons of mastery from music, because that's where I got these from. It's if I try to coach somebody's life that I personally feel like I'm on shaky ground. If I'm telling you something from music, I know it so well. And then you say, I tried that and it changed my... Often people say to me, I read your book and it changed my life. They don't just say, I read your book and I played better. So it's interesting. I think we all know the answer. What's true is true, or at least what's true, what's serviceably true. What services you to go to a higher plane, increasing happiness, probably creativity, and more of an embrace of yourself and your fellow creatures, right? Wouldn't you just call that an elevation of spirit, right? And
Absolutely.
Another person could be walking down the street and there's one thing that's not going their way. So everything is like shit.
Kenny, I'm so happy you brought this up. I heard a story about how your book, Effortless Mastery, was read by a stage 4 cancer patient. And from there, he said it assisted in his recovery. Can you please talk about that story and share how that made you felt?
Well, he was at stage 4, and he read the book and he recovered. I don't make those two things connected, but they were connected in his email. And then because of chemo, he was a trumpet player. Because of chemo, he kind of lost his teeth, I think, or at least if I remember correctly. So then, but because he was in the spirit, in the light, he had to start playing piano. So, I mean, that, I don't know if he played it before, but that's the way he put it. I couldn't play trumpet anymore, so I started playing piano. That is what everybody has available, you know? The world, I think I said this in the first book, it's not made up of those who have it and those who don't. It's made up of those who know it and those who don't. Those that know that they have it. That doesn't mean you're a great musician. It means that you are grateful for whatever kind of musician you are. Imagine you are not good at all, and you got the same appreciation for yourself as someone who had achieved a lot. To me, that's what it's all about. We get lost thinking about the quality of the music. It was so great, it was so great. We lose for me, the point, what it feels like to play it. And everybody's entitled to that if they don't get sidelined trying to identify the level that they're at. In a way, it's the least important thing.
I feel like
that's hard to take in one bite. And if you're a musician, you can always argue, well, there's certain things that I have. But isn't this weird? Whenever you have felt that way, are you all musicians?
I'm just starting in the last 2 years. So Ethan is a musician.
Who's a musician?
Ethan, he's been playing since middle school.
I've been playing for about 10 years now.
I don't know if you've been playing long enough to have gotten wounded yet either, but whenever you were playing and everything felt just like it should be and you didn't try to reach for more, wasn't that the best playing you ever did?
I was going to say it's the best playing is playing that is when it's fun and it feels good. Not worrying about if it's right or wrong or good or bad. Just
right.
when you're grooving and you're just playing whatever feels right and you're improvising and you're having fun. That's when the playing typically sounds better too.
Exactly. When you are doing that, it feels right because it is right. But it is right because it feels right. You weren't trying to go further than what was being presented. This feels good. Why would I think it more? There are people that can lose it by simply saying, wow, I'm really grooving. And from that point on, they have trouble grooving.
It's like you're better off not...
the mind is a funny thing. Yeah.
Well, it's like you're better off not realizing that you're in such a good groove until you're done grooving.
That is, you're better off, but unfortunately, it's usually not under your control.
No.
So one time you've had this great gig because you were just in the space. I would call that in the space, right?
Yeah.
So how was the next gig?
Right? It's all dependent. Kenny, I've seen you talk.
It's usually terrible.
Yeah.
Because you didn't get the real message from the reason you sounded so good, which was your satisfaction with your own self, embracing who you are without conditions, right?
Yeah.
And that produced the natural music. Instead of replicating that, you get caught up trying to replicate the music you played.
Yeah.
And then it becomes about that again. And then all of a sudden you can't play anything. All musicians know, I guess the reason the book was so popular is that I would always start my classes with this. Think about a time when you really needed to play great. How'd you play? And everybody
Probably
goes,
not great.
everybody does that, right? Say, now think about when you were just fooling around with your friends, or you just had a couple of beers, or you're playing for you older musicians, you're playing a bar mitzvah and nobody's listening. And in your mind, there's absolutely no consequences. How did you play then? Everybody does this. So then I say, great. Look what you just found out today. All this time you thought if you cared more, if you obsessed more, if you beat yourself up more, it would drive you to play better. And now you just found out your best playing is when you don't even care.
Uh-huh.
So now I say to the class, now that you've learned that, we don't need to do anything more, right? You're going to play and you're never going to care again, right? You're never going to care again. And they laugh. We're all very predictable. Then they laugh.
It's true.
Say, why are you laughing? If you know that not attaching yourself to what you're playing is making you play better, then why don't you just never do it anymore?
Well, and Kenny, I love the concept of effortless mastery because all three of us golf as well. And it's so hard to play good golf when you
you're
fucking
trying
care
to.
so much.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the same thing, yeah.
That's why people enjoyed the book from a lot of different points of view, and they put it to that. But I mean, that's why it's such common knowledge, you know. So the answer is you can't not care just because you got the word from, you know, Moses came down with a tablet and it said, whenever you golf, look the other way. Can you imagine
Well,
that?
and
Right?
another thing is
But even though you knew that, you would still get caught up in trying to golf well. So we need
True.
to exercise detachment. And we're getting an echo too, which maybe it's a good time for that. We're talking about
right.
That's so funny.
said. Hey, you hear that?
Here's what I'm about to say. This is my question for you, Kenny. As a teacher, as a mentor, how do you differentiate between easy and simple?
Oh, wow. That's such a great question. Well, first of all, there are many things in the earth, many things that are simple, but not easy. That's a very common term. So if I said to you, hey, playing your instrument is simple, just have fun. That can't be any simpler, but not easy. If I said, you know, if you don't want to drink anymore, just don't drink today. And then one day at a time, continue to not drink. Well, that's simple, not necessarily easy. So usually it's done the other way around. We know. Whoop, I just lost you.
The number one food for regular
I got a
BMs,
commercial.
huh? Okay, let's see.
Fastest way to clear out stuck poop is by adding more fiber to
That's like a monkey.
your diet.
Wait a minute.
Not quite.
I still got this
Unless
guy
you wanna
here.
make-
Hold on a second. That's never happened during. Yeah.
We got you now, though.
All of a sudden, I've seen that commercial when I'm watching YouTube. What were we saying? Because I think it was pretty,
Differentiating between easy and simple.
right. There are things that we know are true and it's simple, but it's not easy because we have egos, we have wounds, we have attachments, we have, you know, there's 100,000 different ways. You know, if you look at neuroscience now and neural pathways, and obviously this is the topic of the time. Because whatever you think you are, besides the new agey spiritual explanation, it all has to do with neural pathways that you've traveled so many times that you recognize this is who I am. Except that's what the neural pathway is saying. This is who I am. I'm not a person that plays very well, or I just started playing, or, you know, everything's a neural pathway. And the more I think about this, the more I realize when someone's having an absolute revelation, you know, or a transmission from whatever, right? You don't know if that's true or not, even if they believe it with all their heart. But you do know that something happened in terms of a neural pathway. If you put the scanner on the brain when someone meditates, or if they're praying, if you put the scanner on the brain, like I saw this on that there was a series on God, you know, and the last one, I only saw the last one. It said they put, you know, the thing that gets the color of the brain, everything, 100 people, they asked them, all of them to not pay, pray, right? Now, 50 of them were agnostic. They were going to pray. And the other 50 were absolutely sure that they were praying to Jesus Christ. And you could see quite a difference in the two. They were both enhanced by prayer, making one think that prayer is what God wants you to do, but maybe prayer puts the neural pathways in an alignment that lifts your spirit. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time pondering, is it God? Or they actually, even in Hindu stuff, they call it the self. Well, what's the self? The self, the only difference is a capital S. You know, there are some names for God that there's no word. But we know that space. And no matter who it is, regardless of what it actually is, something's going on in the neural passageways. So why do I focus on that? Because I want to change my behavior by taking different pathways, ways that aren't as familiar, or I haven't traveled as long, so it's not as easy.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
for
it's something
example, my whole life, I've believed that the music comes through me. Does it? As far as I'm concerned, it does.
Yeah.
But that could be
It's-
just a
it's-
neural passageway that happens when I even think about playing the piano.
It's
Kenny,
built-
something we've talked about in the past on this show is those who believe they can and those who believe they can't are both correct. And your belief system, whatever that may be, with religion, with why your life's great or why it sucks, it all kind of falls under that same theme.
Everything does. Even if you're saying it's God or it's way beyond the universe, that's only to that particular mind. And that mind is got neural pathways that are making it feel like that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Or that's what's happening.
Either way,
But
they're
I
right.
don't know which, and they don't really care because the effect is the same. Elevation, enhanced creativity, better feeling towards other living beings, and more generosity towards myself. These are the things, no matter how you get there. Now, I have a funny thing with success and failure. I say people that can't play can. They just got to stop defining it as can't.
Definitely.
What's wrong with
Great.
playing like shit and really loving it?
Yeah.
What's
That's
wrong
so
with
great.
that? But you
Nothing.
know what? If you really felt like you were loving it, it wouldn't sound like shit. The thing that makes it sound like shit is the doubt in the mind of the
Yeah.
player. So any way you can, you want to change that neural programming to who, what? I mean, there are a lot of good models, in Kashmir Shaivism. I am God, in different terminology for Buddhism, but I think one of the biggest problems in this world is the couple of religions that are so solid in their structure that you're either in it or you're out of it. And if you're out of it, you are not a friend.
Yeah. It could be dividing.
It can be dividing, and I think it's up to every individual. I'm not going to blame one religion or another, because I've been with people that are in a certain religion, and I really felt that I could just take them apart with what they were trying to prove to me, right? And then I've been with people under the same religion who were so humble that I suddenly got what that religion was about, So
Yeah.
I don't think it's the structure. It's what humans have available, and however you get there.
Love that. Now, Kenny, you do have a new movie that just came out. Can you give our listeners a little insight on that?
Yeah, well, what happened was this great director, Robert Fritz, wanted to do a movie on me. Now, because of Effortless Mastery, there's tons and tons of video about me as a teacher. And I really didn't want to do a movie about me, the guru, or me, the teacher. And believe me, that's not the way I feel, but that's what happens from having written that book, right? He said,
Yes.
No, I don't care about Effortless Mastery. I've heard your music. I think you're a genius. I want to do a movie on you and your music. And I said, great. Okay. It's like, that's kind of what I've been waiting for.
On the hunt for legendary wings, Buffalo's in Bloomington, Indiana, and Carmel, Indiana has you covered. Crowned top 10 wings in the nation by USA Today, our wings are a fan favorite. Dip into Mrs. Louie's famous sweet Q sauce for that sweet and tangy kick. Visit Buffalo's and wing it like a pro.
The music of Kenny Werner. And it's on the YouTube channel. It's on, you can just put in Soul and Science and you can see it. And it's winning a lot of awards at film festivals. Not because of me, it's because of the director,
How
But,
How did that
it's
title
nice
come?
because it just focuses on my music.
How did that title come to be? Soul and Science.
I worked with Quincy Jones, and he gave a quote Kenny Werner, 360 degrees of soul and science. I mean, I could hear him saying it, it's just the way he talked, my kind of musician or something like that. So when they were looking for a title, they were actually going to use the quote. I said, why don't you call it that, Soul and Science?
That's amazing. What work
it's
did
got
you
a
do
nice
with Quincy?
flow. Yeah, he had a music library company, and then there was a jazz component to it. That's music they shop for movies. Like you could have heard something I wrote in a bunch of movies or even commercials or cable shows or whatever. And what they do is, except for the guy that composes the main thing, they go to a music library and say, well, we need something here for an urban something or other. We need something here when they go into a bar, or we need something here. And so they have libraries, and Quincy has a library, and people will go to that one first. So that's what I did. I did a lot of jazz for him.
Very cool.
And that was really fun because it wasn't about trying to sound original. It was like trying to sound like Frank Sinatra with the Count Basie Orchestra and writing new tunes that way. I had a blast doing that kind of stuff.
That must have been great.
Yeah.
Kenny, for anybody listening right now, for your younger self listening, if you were talking to him, what advice do you wish you had when you were, let's say, 15 years old, growing up, figuring it out? What's something you wish you knew?
Boy, you guys have some great questions. I wish I knew to love myself, even if I never do anything but putting on a tuxedo and playing bar mitzvahs for the rest of my life.
But at 15, 20, 25, what would have been the way for you to achieve self-love?
Well, I thought it was drugs. Because in the beginning, in the 70s was also, the 60s was a discovery, but it was very drug fueled. So that means it's going to have a date on it. It's not going to last forever, but it's induced that way, right? And then the 70s was literally decadence because it didn't focus on peace and love anymore. It was about the drug. So in the 70s, I went, wow, I'm loving myself. But more and more you become preoccupied with the drug, and less you feel like you're learning anything about loving anybody. I think eventually it becomes a very selfish thing. And that some people straighten it out in the 80s. I got in the 80s and I said, if I don't do this, I'm just going to be dead for a bunch of reasons,
Kenny,
at 20 and 25, I would have said the same thing. I would have said, you hate yourself because you have all this talent, and it's just as much your fault as anybody else because you're not really working hard on it, But you're still playing ways of bar mitzvahs. You should be doing more than that. When you walk around with that on your head, even if it's true, it makes life suck.
Interesting.
And so you would try to escape that feeling any way possible. And me just coming out of my teens, what seemed very, very viable was different drugs. And then you graduated, and now, you talk about psilocybin and all, I did all that stuff. But now it turns out under the right circumstances, you can clear a lot of neural pathways. And still neural pathways.
Yeah, like earlier.
Yeah.
Wait, so question, Kenny, what were some of the drugs you were taking, and how did they inspire your creativity?
I'll just leave it at that.
Understood. How did they inspire your creativity at the time?
Depending on the drug.
Okay.
Well, I mean, then you get to the point where you don't want to play unless you have those drugs. That's why I don't really want to take it too much further, but
I understand.
I was pretty lost in the 70s. They have a saying, I'm sure you may not have heard, but the 70s, if you were there, what is it? If you were there, you don't remember them. No, what is it? No, the 70s. If you remember them, you weren't there.
Yeah, that's fine.
So,
what a period in time.
Yeah,
Kenny,
A lot of great art. A lot of great art came from the 1970s.
Absolutely, but less technology, less technique, but more expression.
Do you think with that said,
lose free time?
Do technique and creation oppose one another?
No, they just appeared to, but they really don't. I personally like to make spirit the first and last reason. That said, there's a way to practice so that you're adding language to yourself. But when you play, you have no need to play that language. So what happens is if you find yourself playing that language, you must have been successful at studying it.
It's almost like learn it, and then once you got it down, forget it and play.
Yeah, it is said that way, but it's more like there is two halves of the brain. The one half is when you're playing, trust what's coming out. Because it's not like you can do better by not trusting. It's just going to get worse. So practice trust, right? When you're practicing, don't just be playing because all you're able to do is what you can already do. Have a goal.
Fair.
Say, I can never do this. Use a broad idea. Playing in 7, we'll say, So if you never really practiced it, then you're very creative, but now someone's playing something in 7 and you can't get to your voice at all. You have to keep counting in your head. So the value of technique is getting it down enough so you can be creative on different game boards.
Interesting.
Do you have a practice that you give your students that they should practice every single day when it comes to?
Well, I cut down what they are told to practice by about 90%. Because most people study, but their playing doesn't even change. And that's so expected that nobody even stops and says, hey, I've been taking it's like going to a shrink. I've been going to a shrink for 25 years and I'm still messed up, I've taken lessons for 25 years and I still can't play. And it has to do with this. You can't just learn to do something. It has to become easy. When it becomes easy, then you can play with it. See
and
what I mean?
It's kind of like what we said earlier.
Do things on such a level that you can improvise with it, than to learn 10 things that you can just barely play and will never come out in your playing.
It's kind of like what you were saying earlier with the neuro passageways. When you create the habit and when you believe that you can do differently or play this way or play that way, you probably can. And if you stick with the mindset of the same old with the shrink for 25 years, you're going to stay the same because you're not changing it up.
Something breaks down in that analogy. I'm not exactly sure what. But if you study one thing to the point where without thinking you can just play it. Let's say you always played C major scale and you decided I'm going to play F sharp major scale, but I'm not going to leave it until it feels as familiar as a C major scale. That's learning something deeply enough so that it might affect your music. So I try to get everybody to focus on a minimum of material, which Bill Evans told me that very thing. We were at his birthday party and someone said, Bill, what do you practice? And without skipping a beat, he said, I practiced the minimum. I think I was the only one that knew what he meant. Not the minimum of time, the minimum amount of material, because he wanted that material to be completely in his hands, because then he could create with it. People are too busy. It's quantity over quality. If whatever you study, if it doesn't become very accessible, what makes you think you're ever going to improvise with it?
Oh, wow.
And yet, that's the standard way of teaching and learning.
Well, I'm happy you concluded that with mentioning teaching and learning. As you've dropped all these tidbits of wisdom here in the last 45, whatever it's been, I'm curious for you, how have you evolved as a mentor?
Well, you start when you can play really well and you can have great experiences. It doesn't mean the same thing it did to you like when you were 21, and like, wow, did I just play that, But what grows, what helps a person who's aging is this sense that he's really helping somebody else get on with it, helping them skip maybe a few decades of wrong decisions, or just the learning that the short road is the long road, the patience to learn and get stuff in your mind, in the neural pathways, and in your hands, depending on your instrument, is worth it because your playing expands, So I would say I get strength from knowing that somebody's really been helped, and I evidently help a lot of people because I get that a lot. You know,
Beautiful.
And
You
it's
know, I
like,
mean, just one thing that changed it greatly. You may or may not know that my daughter had a car accident in 2006 and died, right? And she was just starting to drive. And she was going to be a good musician, guitar, piano, violin. I would say that since then, every student I have, I think if it was Catherine, what wouldn't I pull out of my consciousness to help her along? So I started to feel about anybody I was helping. It was a little deeper after that, much deeper. You know, I said, well, especially if they were around her age, I say, I don't want this kid to bang into walls and then he's suddenly 38 and he still can't play because nobody put him on a path that was progressive, that was incremental. The only way this thing happens is incrementally. And to do that, you have to do repetition. And to do repetition, you have to develop patience, the patience of a saint, the patience that it doesn't even matter if you get there. And patience comes from the space. So in a way, we're back to mastery.
Back to space.
From the space, you can practice something forever because you don't have to reach it.
Wow. And it's like wisdom isn't learning from your own mistakes. It's learning from other people's mistakes.
Well, wisdom is not needing to learn.
Oof.
But you do it anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oof.
That's that
Well,
space.
Listen, I never said that before, but you and I just played a phrase back and forth. If you want to know what music feels like.
Well, thank you. Wow.
You threw something out, and that elicited that for me, and it had the eerie ring of truth.
God.
You know what I mean? And
Kenny,
we all
this is-
shared it. That's jazz.
There we go.
What a full circle drawback. Well, Kenny, I really...
We'd be able to define jazz to
There we
my
go.
satisfaction.
I love it.
Kenny, I really admire the way you think, and this is one of those episodes that we're going to go back and listen to for quite some time. So thank you very much for joining us. This has been a really great experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny.
My pleasure, guys.